Hello everyone, I'm Colin Kinnett. Today I'm going to show you a couple of things that I have used in the past on table saws that I've had that didn't have very good fences, and things that I did to speed up the operation of that machine. So let's get started. Now, the first thing to know about a table saw is that if you do have a table saw with a fence that you can align, you always align the fence to a miter slot. Everything in a table saw aligns to the miter slot. The miter gauge is adjusted to the miter slot. The blade is aligned to the miter slot. And one of the things that we do, I in the past have used just some blocks like this. Now, if you look at these are just 3/4 inch plywood, and you know what? Obviously they're loose in there. And you know what you can use? You can use a wedge. You can also use some veneers. You can purchase those veneers. I use a lot of this, and when you just wedge that in there, it makes them tight. They sit in there tight. Now, the reason I want to do that, if you look closely, right along there, you'll notice that the miter slot, particularly in this saw, there's a little bit of a groove before it drops down. So it's very hard to measure from the miter slot to the fence. And the only real way of doing that, you want to be able to be right up and down. And the best way of doing that is to have a nice sharp edge. And in this case, it happens to be this piece of plywood. One of the things I did in the past was to make myself a jig that sat on top of the table, so the table saw blade is rolled down. But what I did was I used 2-inch a lot. So what I did was set up the blade so that the fence was 2 inches away. Now, it took me a while to adjust. In this case, I can just lock it, but I had to adjust the front and the back, and I made sure it was set up at 2 inches all the way. Well, it was 2 inches here, but it was parallel all the way across. And the way I did that was by using those blocks to measure, to make sure it was exactly the same distance. So then what I did was rolled the blade back down, and then I took a piece of plywood, and then I used some of this miter slot material. A lot of you have questioned me about this. I make my own. You can purchase it if you want. I just go to the plastic store and buy this, and I'll put a link on the website so that you'll know what this is. Now, what I'm going to do is, and what I did in the past was I actually took these and screwed them, drove screws through this, and this is just miter slot material that's going to sit in there. Now, what I'm going to tell you about this, using this miter slot material, is if you just screw into it, if you drive a screw into it, because it's so dense, the plastic around the screw is going to come out. It sort of extrudes out from that the point of that screw. So you really need to pre-drill this stuff. I'm not even going to bother with that today, because I'm just going to do a quick demonstration of how this works and what it looks like. So what you do is you put your miter slot material there, and it's best to have it sticking out a little bit, because that way you can always see where it is. It's always quicker to see. So in this case, I'm just going to use some nails that I've got here and just tack it on. And I think most of you can already figure out how this is going to work. Okay, so there is what it looks like on the back. And now I've already preset this to 2 inches, so I can just take this jig in here and know that I'm going to cut to 2 inches. I can put my fence on that, and I know that's set to 2 inches. I can then lock the back or the front or both or whatever it is. Know that that's done like that, and now I just lift it off, and guess what? The fence is already set to a 2-inch width. But look, here's where it gets even more fun. When you cut that 2-inch slot, you can actually make a blank, another 2-inch blank in here. So whatever you've cut off of there, you could now take that and lay that on there, and now you've got a 4-inch as well. So once you lay this in, lay your blank in there, run your fence up to that, now you've got a 4-inch piece in there. So there's lots of interesting things that you can do with it. Okay, that was the first jig. The second jig, we're going to make some extendable arms so that you'll actually be able to measure an exact distance. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a couple of arms with slots. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to align this mark here with that one over there. And I can feel the blade needs to go down a little bit. I'm going to bring the blade up. I'm going to run it all the way to this mark, then I'm going to turn the saw off and turn it around, and you'll watch how this works. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to drill some holes in my blanks here, and this one's already got a hole, but it's not big enough. Then I'm going to use these, this is a thread, machine thread on one side and a screw on the other, and I'm going to screw the screw part into the plastic, and what'll happen is eventually it's going to look something like this, and then I'll have a wing nut on top, and that's going to allow us to set that fence. So I'm going to go over to the table saw and drill a couple of holes. We'll put those in so you can see what they look like, and then we'll be just about finished. There's those two little pieces that I put in there, and you can see obviously it's protruding through the bottom. I'm just going to use my Dremel tool and just trim that off. Now the last thing I want to do is round over these very tops here so that we have a defined edge. So there's those two arms assembled. So all it is a wing nut on there because we want it to be adjustable, and a big flat washer. So the way this works is quite simple. You basically set your, align your table saw blade to whatever number it is that you want, and you don't actually lock it because remember your fence is kind of moving around, but what you do is you take your arm and move it to the beginning where the blade is, take it there, lock it down, move that sort of out of the way, take your second one and lock that to the same place. Now you can take that to the far end of your fence, this to the near end, and now you just touch your fence here, lock it down, do the same thing on the other side, touch it to that arm, lock it down, and now you've got a perfect parallel fence at whatever distance you want. Well, that concludes my video for today. A couple of pretty simple and pretty effective jigs that you can make for aligning your fence on your table saw to make life in your workshop a little bit easier. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.